I'm not here to talk about me. I actually want to hear a little bit about all of you. So who in here would consider themselves a designer? Yeah, all right. How about a developer, front end, back end, whatever? How about neither of those things, but they do WordPress somehow, content writing, SEO, business owner, have a website. All right, I like to know the mix of who I'm talking to so that I know kind of what to talk about. But what I want to start my talk out with is a very brief history of the interwebs. And so we start at, like most things, in the beginning. In the beginning, there was the web page. This is the early web. And so the early web needed a metaphor to explain what we were looking at. And so they based it off of things that we were familiar with, like books, magazines, literature, or printed material. All of these things had these things called pages, which didn't change and had text on them. And the early web was actually very similar to this. It was made out of static HTML, and so these were pages. They were all hand-coded, there was a lot of repetition. If you wanted to have a header or a footer, like WordPress. The reason these existed is because we wanted to separate content from the display of content. We wanted to allow people to edit their own content, and we really wanted to stop repeating ourselves in code. So the result of this is that rather than static HTML, websites have become dynamic. So they're now built on the fly from databases and templates and put together and output as we need them. And that means that websites have all of these interesting things. So we want to do more than just display non-changing content. So now we have things like archives that might be date-based or category-based. We have users, we have databases, we can filter things, we can interact with things. We can display things conditionally based on something. We can have commerce. These are all really interesting things now that we are beyond static HTML. The other interesting thing is that websites are also modular. If you look at any given set of content, it's not made up of unique snowflakes. Within each view, there are multiple elements, and many of these things are reused in multiple places. So that means that websites are actually based off of a set of rules or larger systems with specific components inside them. And this relates a lot if you're a programmer to stuff like the dry, do not repeat yourself principle, or the single-use principle, let something do one thing and do one thing well. Websites are a lot like this. There's a specific system for organizing these components, and it's called atomic design. Who in here has heard of atomic design? All right, so now maybe like a third of you, so this is great, because I'm going to teach you a little bit about atomic design. And I'm pretty sure that every single one of you in here completely remembers high school. Do very much, kind of, hydrogen explodes, but like other than that, they don't really do very much. But what starts to get a little more interesting is molecules. And molecules in chemistry are when atoms come together to form a much bigger element. And this is in web design when you combine a bunch of HTML elements together. And molecules are kind of like these things. You might recognize like a form. A form is a molecule, right? Because you have a bunch of inputs and a button, and they might be wrapped in a form element. Breadcrumb is a great example. It's a bunch of links put together, maybe a definition list where you have, or a table. These are all molecules. Not quite super interesting yet, but they're starting to be recognizable as something else. Where we start to get interesting and where you start to recognize this stuff is the thing in atomic design called organisms. This is when you start combining a bunch of molecules together, and when you do this, it allows you to have something that you can actually interact with. And we are starting to recognize these as these block-level modular elements. So what's a great example? The classic hero image, right? So a big background image with some text and a button. That is an example of an organism. Or maybe a video player with a playlist of other videos. That is an organism. Or a call to action text with a form underneath. Or paragraph text with a block quote. Or a headline with a breadcrumb. These are all great examples of organisms. You can start to see that these are recognizable block-level elements on the site. Above organisms in atomic design, we have templates, and we are probably very familiar with templates as WordPress developers. But this is when you're starting to combine a bunch of organisms together to build layouts. So for example, here's a couple different examples of templates. You can see that both of them have the headline and breadcrumb organism. They both have the long form text and block quote organism, but one of them is maybe more like a blog article type thing with a big hero image at the top, and the other one is using it alongside a video player and a call to action form, so maybe that's more like a landing page or something, but they're the exact same organisms put together in different ways. Above templates in atomic design, we have something called pages. And pages are when you take a template and put specific content into it. So for example, you can have the same template and different pages. So this is an example of what I said about a while ago. Exact same template, different content, right? So we have some different colors, we have different articles being pulled up, we have different stuff in the sidebar, but it's the same template powering both of these things. So that's the basic high-level overview of what atomic design is. So how does this relate to what WordPress is doing? How has WordPress as a content management system evolved to address our need for dynamic and modular content? Well, as a content management system, it's already kind of providing that dynamic content, right? In fact, that is the content right here. We've all seen this. This was revolutionary. This kind of thing was revolutionary compared to having to edit HTML directly. This is a big change. And it was supposedly what you see is what you get experience. At least compared to HTML, it definitely was. And you can see this is kind of the traditional way of editing WordPress. Though you can edit it, though you can do some stuff, format it, maybe add some of those little atoms to it, links and bold and lists and stuff like that, it's still the content is still treated as a static blob of content. So it's not modular, it's not very dynamic, it is being pulled from a database, but all it is just kind of sitting there. And we needed more. We needed more than that. So the ideal content management experience, I got really excited because I can do A, B, C, D, E, F. Yes! So the ideal content management experience is kind of evaluated based on these 6 things. So it needs to be accessible. Basically easy to understand. If you understand WordPress, you understand how to do this. And also it should be actually accessible, uppercase accessible. Balanced, it should strike a good middle ground between decisions and options. So it should give you the control you need, but it shouldn't give you so many things that you're overwhelmed. It should be consistent. So it should feel very familiar and native, and it should also easily relate to the output of the content on the front end. It should be dynamic. It should be able to pull in data from other sources and build interesting stuff. So building an archive, building a grid, building a list of users, building a list of products, that dynamic content, not just static content. It should be extensible, able to be developed and built upon, so it should be able to expand beyond what it is. And it should be flexible. It should be able to accommodate a variety of layouts and a variety of types of content. So how do we build dynamic modular content in WordPress when all we had to start with was just the content, our blob of static content? So the first chapter of this was extending the content area. So we had our content area, we wanted to do more with it. First round was trying to extend this. So the first way we did it was to just edit HTML directly in the text editor. And I'm sure many of you have done this before. This was definitely something that happened with the early adopters, a lot of the developers that maybe started using WordPress at first. But this is definitely not ideal for writers, bloggers, or anybody that doesn't write code. It's definitely prone to error. There's a lot of problems with this. So we were like, we don't want to ask people to do this. This is a terrible idea. So then we came with shortcodes, which are basically pseudocode that enable you to execute functions within the content. Much better than writing actual functions, but not by much, because it has a lot of the same problems as real code. It's really easy to make mistakes. It's kind of hard to tell what that's going to be based on staring at it. And it's also not consistent between different solutions. Everybody kind of implemented shortcodes their own way. There's no consistent way of writing them. There's no consistent way of what parameters you're going to pass. So it got a little confusing. There was a short-lived visual solution called Shortcake, which was very, very interesting as they were developing it, because it enables you to kind of more visually insert shortcode elements into the content. But development on this has kind of fallen away as stuff like Gutenberg has come into play, which is actually probably a better solution than this. But this was kind of an interesting solution that was starting to happen. Another thing that was really interesting was the era of widgetized pages, which was all the rage a little while ago. So this is just kind of a screenshot I found, but content was being hidden all over the place. Like you could put it into widgets, but then you had to go to the widget thing to edit it. The customizer was introduced, and now people were putting content and stuff into the customizer. There's extra menus, there were custom theme options pages with pages on pages of stuff, and sometimes content was put into there. These were all ways that we were trying to extend the content in some way and do something a little bit more dynamic. Last year, there was a survey that was done about how people extend the editor. This was a result of that survey that was saying, like, what are plugins that people were adding. So people were looking for advanced TinyMCE, which just gave a lot more styling tools. People wanted to be able to do basic stuff like, I want to add a table, I want to add a gallery, I want to add forms, I want to add columns. Like, please just let me add columns, right? Even I use some of these. I mean, I use a form plugin on pretty much all of my site. I have used table plugins on client sites before. These are block level elements that we just couldn't do inside the content. So as an evaluation of all of these first attempts, you can see we're in the red and yellow over there. We're not doing a very good job of doing these things. They were very inconsistent. They were very hacky and counterintuitive. I mean, it was kind of pioneering. It was kind of the Wild West. We're trying to figure out how to do this. A lot of these solutions required knowledge of code or pseudocode with the short codes. There's a huge learning curve. Everything was different. Things were hidden all over the place. And my biggest problem with it is that a lot of these things required you to mix content with structure. Stuff like editing code, stuff like short codes means that it's all blended together in this one thing. There's no good way of separating it out. So this wasn't really working. It was a great first attempt, but we needed to do better. It was very frustrating. So then in chapter 2, now we're like, all right, aside from the content, let's rethink how this user interface works. Let's try to reinvent the entire experience of editing in WordPress. And so then page builders started to come into play, and some of the popular ones like Visual Composer, which is with WP Bakery, Divi has a page builder, Beaver Builder, many of them are here. These are all trying to solve this need of I want to be able to build something dynamic and I don't want to deal with short codes and all of that stuff. Most of these are just controlling what's happening inside the content, although many of them also have builders that let you do your entire site. And so a lot of these, there's a lot of different interfaces, right? But a lot of them, they're drag and drop type things. They've kind of created their own entire UI, where you are physically dealing with dragging and dropping stuff around and building a page. It's adding a ton of UI, and it can get really complex. Like every one of these little buttons here has its own set of settings. Every little thing has its own set. There's like settings upon settings upon settings. There's a million things. It's very, very powerful, but it's also very, very hard to learn. And so what's our evaluation of page builders as a solution? All right, so we're getting a little better. We've got a couple green lights happening. We've still got some red lights. What's good about them is that you can create both static and dynamic content. So you can create a post and put stuff on there. You can also do stuff like, I want to create a grid. I want to create a list. I want to create products. A lot of these page builders will let you build some of that interesting stuff and pull data in. Another good thing about them is that you don't need to know how to write code to use the tool or to build custom stuff. What's great about them too is the drag and drop interface. We want some of that stuff. A lot of them have front end, or what you see is what you get views. So that's really great. And some of them let you tackle the entire theme, not just the stuff within the content, which I consider to be a really interesting dynamic there. So these are some good things about page builders. In my opinion, there's also a lot of less good things about page builders. First of all, each one has basically come up with their entire different user interface, and so you can't really go between one or the other. And a lot of these user interfaces don't really feel native to WordPress. They definitely feel like a new thing that's been tacked on that you have to then learn not only the WordPress way of doing things, but also X-Page Builder's way of doing things. They still have a lot of hidden settings. There's still a lot of places where content is hidden that you don't know where it is. There's so many options, and sometimes there's also a little bit of a performance issue with some of them because there's just a lot of extra code that had to be written in order to let you be able to drag and drop things. And again, we still have the problem where we are mixing design with structure. We have end users making decisions about font sizes and colors and padding and spacing and all the things that I believe as a designer they shouldn't be worrying about. They should be worrying about their content and their layouts and how to build compelling experiences. They should not be worrying about what pixel size the font should be. So that's a little bit frustrating to me, and that's why I'm not giving them super high scores, although they're definitely better than what came before. Another thing that happened aside from page builders is the use of custom fields. And so advanced custom fields is a very popular one that you'll hear a lot about, but there's also CMV2 and Field Manager, which are both open source solutions. But these are frameworks that allow people to register and use metaboxes. Now, metaboxes are native to WordPress core. You can just hand code them, but these are frameworks that have a lot more interesting ones. And I am personally an advanced custom fields user. That's what I use. So I can show you some visual examples of some of the stuff that I've built using advanced custom fields to try to solve this problem. So this is an example from a plugin that I install on most of my client sites, where I am allowing them to be able to build a grid archive and then have some options of what posts go in that. There's a bunch of things they could choose to build, but this is now allowing my clients to build dynamic content. Another example of giving them the ability to build a single scroll page with some buttons, more custom fields. So all of these are custom fields. They show up either instead of or on top of the content or below the content. Here is one that actually allows them to build kind of like a page builder-esque thing. It's using advanced custom fields, flexible content fields, and they can add basically one of 10 different most common things, like a hero image, or a list, or a slider, or a call to action box. And they can add them and build a website out of them. When you toggle any one of them open, there's a bunch of different things you can do. Most of my clients very much enjoyed this, and it's definitely preferable to the shortcode method, preferable to some of the other things. But also, they're not dealing with font sizes, colors, padding, all of that stuff, that's some of the baggage that comes with a page builder. They are just dealing with content entry. So we see custom fields. We're starting to get more green, although there's still some yellow lights. But what's good about them? They're extremely extensible and customizable. Pretty much, if you're a developer, you can build a custom field solution for almost any use case, general or specific. We can use them to populate our pages with static or dynamic content, so text and media, or interesting post relationships, archives, users, etc. We can build really interesting and complex solutions with them while making our users only have to worry about data entry. And we can follow the atomic design model where we can build these blocks that are reusable and have people start to stack them and componentize them. So those are the good things. There are some cons to custom fields. So you saw what they look like. They're not exactly attractive. They're definitely just like boxes. People have done some styling of them, but they still feel very blocky and very kind of data entry-esque. I know there was a editorial on the Tavern a few years ago where it was like, writing content in meta boxes makes me feel like a data entry person, not a publisher. And so it does kind of back away from some of that creativity. Another con is that as a user, you do not have to write code to use meta boxes, but you probably do need to write code to be able to create your own meta boxes, right? So I can build you a site that you can use all the meta boxes for, but if you're like, but I want to have a thing that does this, you probably have to hire me again or someone else because you're not going to be able to write them yourself. Again, they feel more like data entry than WYSIWYG. We've moved pretty far away from WYSIWYG at this point. Another downside to stuff like this and some of the other solutions is that we're saving content into metadata instead of into the content, which has some implications in terms of, it doesn't show up in native WordPress search anymore. There's some performance stuff with that. So it is still kind of a hack. And it also doesn't address, stuff like widgets and options and all that other stuff. So we haven't quite solved the problem yet. And so now we get to Gutenberg, which is the kind of the latest phase in content management. And if you haven't seen Gutenberg yet, basically this is what you get when you start a Gutenberg post. It's just this blank thing. It's very much like if you've written on Medium or anything like that. Hi, this is Gutenberg. When you look at Gutenberg and you look at blocks, now remember atomic design where I talked about these core elements? These blocks are basically those elements, right? You see stuff like paragraphs and headings and buttons those are atoms, right? Like those are those atomic elements. You see molecules, stuff like lists, or pull quotes. You see organisms. A great example of an organism, one of the core blocks is this hero image, right? So we've got the image and we've got the text. And this is a reusable block. This is an organism, according to atomic design. A heading is an atom. Unordered lists are atoms. Buttons are atoms. Pull quote is a molecule because they've got the quote and the citation, and then also these rule elements. So you can see these really interesting things starting to happen. Gutenberg is following atomic design. All of these things are reusable elements, they're stackable, they're reorderable. And there's some really interesting stuff going on in Gutenberg too with reusable blocks. So reusable blocks are basically ones that you can create and then save, and then when you change them in one place, it changes everywhere. So that's really great, and that's getting back into that don't repeat yourself principle of design, where you want things to be able to you don't want to have to create a call to action block like this thing. If I change this somewhere here, it'll change everywhere. Well, that's great. Like this, for a client, I was using it as kind of the big call to action at the bottom of the page. If they're like, oh, I really actually want it to be blue, I'll be like, sweet, change it to blue, and it's blue everywhere now. So that's great. That is a really good example of don't repeat yourself. Gutenberg is going in a pretty good direction. A lot of people are building custom blocks, and so we're not just limited to what the core blocks can do. Core right now does not have a whole lot of dynamic content. They do have a couple of post lists and stuff like that, but other people, like WooCommerce, has some product list blocks, so you can start building store pages. This is the Array Themes atomic block thing that I installed on a client site. They have a bunch of custom Gutenberg blocks, so that's really interesting. Like more and more developers are going to be building custom blocks. It's going to get a lot more useful. And there's future roadmaps for blocks to create even more compelling layouts. So we're starting to talk about stuff like sections where you can nest things in them. I know, again, columns, we all just want freaking columns. And then you can put other things inside those columns. Repeatable blocks would be great. So if you want to be able to have one block and then be able to use it again and again. Conditional blocks are a thing where, have a block display only if this other condition is met. Templates where you can pre-open a page that has a series of blocks already. Like these are all things that are already on the roadmap or already capable of being done. So you can see how that really fits in with that atomic design model of being able to reuse content. So Gutenberg is, in my opinion, almost all green. There's a lot of really good things about what Gutenberg is. Again, it is extensible and customizable. You can build a lot of things on top of it. Because its goal is to go into core, it's going to feel like WordPress because it is WordPress. It's going to be part of WordPress, and so it's very, very consistent. It follows the atomic design model. I think that's great. Like the way we operate with Gutenberg is the way that you interact with any atomic design project. It's very, very close to what you see is what you get, especially if the person who built the theme styles the Gutenberg editor to match the theme. Like there's certain things you have to go through to load some styles into the editor, and basically that means that what you see in the editor is really, really close to what you're going to see on the front end. You have the separation of design and structure finally. It does give you the option of having some design settings, so there are some places where it makes sense to be able to pick a color or pick a font size. But the theme developer can lock that down, so it's like, okay, but you can only pick from your brand colors, or okay, but you can only pick from these sizes. The theme developer can customize that to give the client the right amount of control so they can make decisions, but they're not literally like, should it be 20 pixels of padding or 25? I don't know. And another good thing for WordPress performance is that, for better or worse, it all lives inside the content. So we're not trying to hack around it by using metadata or something else. Gutenberg does have cons. And as a designer, I'm super, super excited about Gutenberg. As a developer, I'm watching what they're doing and seeing, okay, like I do have some opinions on that. So obviously right now, it is still a feature plugin. It's not quite ready yet. There are accessibility issues. The interface is kind of buggy. There's some disagreements on how the UI should actually be, whether or not it's actually intuitive. So it's not there yet. That's a big con right now. there are some backwards compatibility issues for existing solutions. A lot of things do work. I've installed it on some test versions of sites that have an extensive amount of metadata. What I've noticed is that any metadata that exists, it loads fine. This is with advanced custom fields. But if you want to try to load up a new thing and it didn't already have the metadata in place, it doesn't show up. So it's like they're working on it. It's still in progress. Another downside is that there's still not many dynamic content options built into core. I don't think that's a huge downside because a lot of third-party people are going to be addressing that. Again, like WooCommerce has product blocks if you want that. Although we are getting back into that problem. Oh man. Good lighting. That's happening. All right. That's fine. You get to see my slides. It doesn't matter. Yes. Great. I was just testing you all to make sure you're paying attention. Advanced custom fields are going to be releasing some PHP-based ways of being able to interact with Gutenberg blocks, which I'm very excited about. So it's not all bad, but this is kind of where Gutenberg's at right now. But what does the future of Gutenberg and other modular content delivery look like in terms of moving forward? In my opinion, Gutenberg, what's more important about Gutenberg than what it is going to be when it comes out is the fact that it's going to become, I think, the design paradigm for all of WordPress content. I think rather than competing with page builders, what Gutenberg is going to be, it's going to be the visual paradigm that future solutions will conform to and expand upon. So when the customizer came out, before the customizer came out, we just had like a billion different theme options pages, and they were all different. Everybody had their own way of doing stuff. As more and more people started adopting the customizer, suddenly most theme options started moving into the customizer. We had a consistent experience no matter what we were using. That was kind of the point of the customizer. I think that Gutenberg is going to do this for the page builder. Page builders, the aesthetic is going to be the Gutenberg aesthetic, and so even if they impose their own ways of doing things, or their own modules, or their own blocks, it's going to be within what Gutenberg looks like, and so no matter what we install, it's still going to feel the same. And I think that's going to be great. Instead of having to learn 50 different UIs to do 50 different things, it's yet another way of standardizing content. So I think that is a good thing about Gutenberg. Another thing is right now, Gutenberg, we're only talking about what's happening within the content. But I know future casting-wise, the content is not the only thing that is modular on a site, right? Like headers and footers repeat, sidebars repeat. There's lots of other things on your website that are modular besides just the content. And I believe that the future of Gutenberg is going to be enabling us to control all of those things as blocks. And a lot of the page builders have tried to tackle this as well with stuff like the Beaver Builder's Themer. Like that's something that's letting you tackle whole page design. I think Gutenberg is going to be moving into this space as well. And again, this is also cool because as we're going into stuff that's more conditional, maybe we'd be able to build things that have completely different conditional headers based on different stuff, based on who's logged in or not logged in. Like what if your entire site is basically a totally different experience based on some condition? That's kind of cool. We can do that now with code, but now maybe we're going to be able to do that without necessarily having to be the ones that wrote the code ourselves. Somebody wrote the code, but it doesn't have to be you, right? That's kind of cool. But these are things that we're going to be interacting with, not just voice control, but also text-based chat interactions or, I don't know, virtual reality type stuff, but all of these things, there's really interesting implications for that in the future. So anyway, that is all of that. I have a further reading section, which again, I'm going to share the links to all of this stuff so you don't have to frantically write down all these URLs. I have a bunch of resources in here if you want to learn more about modular design, including Brad Frost's articles about it, a bunch of different stuff if you want to learn more about that. I have a collection of links on Gutenberg, some of the official repositories, some really good editorials, some really good, it's really hard to read, but it looks better on a computer screen, which you'll see it. And also, these are my things that I did. I showed some examples of it. So this is where you can find my base theme and the ACF extension plugins that I built if you want to see what those are. And if you want to see a live demo of those things and how my clients can, or you, because it's free on GitHub, feel free to grab it. that's all that stuff. So that is all of my formal presentation. That is the link to where the slides are at. So that's the slide to take pictures of. That's me. That's my Twitter. That's how you get a hold of me. And I am available for the next 6 minutes and 45 seconds for questions. Take pictures of the slide. Any questions? But it doesn't have to be about what I talked about.
Yeah, you touched on a little bit about page builders.
Sure.
I was wondering, what do you think I wouldn't just be too direct, but about like Elementor? What would be the future of it with Gutenberg?
So I have not used Elementor. I pretty much strictly work on bespoke, custom developed stuff, so I've only interacted with a few page builders or anything like that, so I cannot speak to that. But there are certainly several page builder people here, and I think that you should ask that. This one over there. Good luck.
I am really worried about locking down the styles for the users, and you're suggesting that's really going to be possible to do?
Yes, so as of right now, even with the core blocks, some of the core blocks give you some color options, some text size options, and all of that stuff, and there's already a built-in way for that to turn off the color picker and to change the default colors to whatever colors you want them to be, and to change whatever the default text sizes are that it gives you to whatever you want them to be. So that already exists for the core blocks, which I've already tested it out, and it works great. It's well documented. If you write code, like it's there. And I believe that they are working on ways to be able to lock down templates of things and to be able to only show certain blocks that you want to have shown. So I think that's going to be a major thing. That's going to be a major thing to make me happy with it too, right? But you can already do some of that now.
So is it similar a bit to how we can use advanced HoneyMCE to create certain styles or lock out other words, remove H1, that sort of thing?
So right now it's all programmatic, so you do have to be able to write a function and put it. Yeah, but I mean it's basically like filtering stuff that exists now. So you write your. It's documented on the Gutenberg site, so I can't like tell you exactly how to do it off the top of my head. But you basically write a function that says like, instead of these colors, here's all the colors that I want you to use, and that stuff. So.
Okay, and a second kind of related one is currently there's a lot of issues with the way the editor rewrites the HTML and like WP Auto P and all of that. Is that all changed?
There is a lot of different markup happening now that I cannot specifically speak to, but there are a lot of additional elements being introduced because of the fact that these are now blocks. And also in order to tell WordPress that it is a Gutenberg block. I cannot speak very specifically to all of it because I have really mostly only interacted with Gutenberg from a user standpoint so far. But there is a lot of additional interesting markup and things happening. So you might want to take a look at that. Yes?
This is slightly off topic, but I was just wondering in terms of your design process, do you actually start with atoms when you're designing something?
So kind of yes. And we can, if anybody wants to chat about what I do with design processes, I'm happy to like show some demos of some of that stuff later. If you want to find me, but I do create a little design file that I call site elements that is literally just like kind of a visual list of every single thing. So like H1 through H6, paragraph, link, tabs, forms, and just like I just do a little mock-up of like each of the styles of each of those. So kind of yeah, like those are all atoms. What I do is I do that. I do a style tile. for general mood boarding. I do kind of a hybrid mock-up thing of every module that I build, or every block that I would build, as one long mock-up, and then I'd mock up maybe a couple of specific pages that are kind of special snowflakes that maybe aren't going to use modules or are going to have a very unique layout. But that's basically the way I do it. So it's kind of very similar to the atomic design process. Like we start with the very basic elements, and then we get more and more large and specific as we go on.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Is Gutenberg compatible with the page builders that are currently out there? Can you have both of them on your site and use them in different capacities?
So that will depend on the page builder.
Mm-hmm.
Many of the large page builders, I mean, I know like one of the Beaver builder people was speaking this morning about Gutenberg. So many of the big ones are very aware of it and are working on compatibility and working on how to leverage it. I can't speak to every single page builder that exists. The only thing I could say is set up a demo site, install them both, see what happens right now. But I know for sure that Beaver Builder is definitely working on it, and I'm assuming that most of the other big ones are as well.
Thank you.
Cool. Probably good. All right. See you around.